Here's a fun fact. Motorcycle manufacturers do not want you riding a demo bike that has less than 625 miles on it. Why? Because breaking in a motorcycle actually matters. There has been so much debate about whether or not you should break in your motorcycle hard or soft or skip the break in, or it doesn't even matter because it's broken in straight from the factory. The reality is there's so much more to breaking in a motorcycle than just behaving properly with the engine for 600 miles. And to prove that, I bought myself right here this brand spanking new Aprilia Tuono V4 1100 Factory Ultra Gold, one of the longest names in motorcycling history. Actually, I didn't. That would be insane for me to buy one just for this video. This actually came from Aprilia of Americas. They were like, hey, we need you to break in this motorcycle. It's sitting at AF1 because it's gonna be at MotoGP and we don't have time to do it. So can you go ride it around for 600 miles? And I was like, yes, please. I can absolutely do that. I will happily fall on that grenade, Aprilia, anytime you need someone to break in a motorcycle. You got my number. But this gives me a great opportunity to walk you through how I break in a motorcycle, regardless of whether it's a 400cc single-cylinder motorcycle all the way up into a 1100cc V4 175 horsepower hyper naked. Process is functionally the same, and I do it with every one of my motorcycles. Every manufacturer has different break-in recommendations, with Triumph going so far as to give you a pie chart on the gas tank showing you exactly when and how to rev up the motor. This is important for all the reasons the internet dads claim: seating piston rings, wearing in tight tolerances on bearings, and more. Anything in the motor that moves or has something moving against it needs to wear in. Aprilia recommends that you keep the motor below 7,500 RPM, and a lot of dealers will actually set your shift light to flash right around then. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot to it, or so it seems. Everything, and I mean everything, on your bike needs to wear in. Your suspension components are tight from the factory. Your brake pads are not bedded in. Your clutch cable has not had time to stretch. And the gears in the transmission are still sharp and need time to wear in. Not to mention wheel bearings. The list of stuff that needs to break in is longer than Long John Silver's silver dong. Everyone just thinks about the motor because it's a motorcycle, but by just focusing on the motor, you're overlooking so many other components that need to break in properly. Now that settled, let's take this thing out for its first ride. Now, this is something that I do personally, especially since a lot of dealerships, a lot of motorcycle dealerships are right on a highway. So the first thing you end up doing when you get on your motorcycle is getting on the highway, taking it up to speed. On a motor this fresh, maybe it doesn't do anything, maybe it does. I always like to let it start and warm up a little bit. I don't want to take a 95-degree motor out on the highway. Now this bike's going to come to temperature really quickly, which is nice. So let's mount up. All right, away we go. Wow, okay, yeah, that suspension is a bit stiff, and that clutch and quick shifter definitely is a bit stiff. So on this first ride, the first ride that I take on a motorcycle, it's all about just getting to learn it. I'm not trying to go fast. I'm not trying to set any records. I'm literally just commuting right now, and I'm using this time to figure out what the bike's about. This happens every single time I test ride a motorcycle. Because I've ridden so many, that step happens a lot faster for me. But you'll notice I'm really not getting on the power with this. I'm not cracking the throttle open. I'm keeping it nice and chill because these tires, these Super Corsas, are brand new. Or I forget what's on here. These are brand spanking new tires. This bike has a ton of torque. And the last thing I want to do is make a gif of myself wiping out on a brand new factory bike. And then the last thing I end up doing on the highway whenever I'm breaking in a motorcycle, this is no matter where I am in the break-in cycle,
I'm always accelerating. I'm always shifting gears. I'm trying to interact with the transmission as much as I can. Even if that means I'm short shifting, I want to be moving around. I don't want to keep the engine in the same place. Oh man, I'm barely getting on it and I'm in tour mode. This has so much power. Oh my god.
Now, we covered some good do's and don'ts there, but here's a few more for you to consider. If your bike has cruise control, do not use it. You don't want to sit at one speed on the highway for 600 miles. If your bike has a quick shifter and a blipper, use a mix of clutch shifting and quick shifting so that your clutch can wear in a little bit. If your bike has rider modes, spend some time in all of them. Some will work your motor harder than others. If you're in traffic, be mindful of your temperatures. A new motor can run hotter than a broken-in one, and you do not want to exceed 225 degrees. Aluminum does not like that. Oh, and for you speed demons out there, if you're later in the break-in, say 450 to 500 miles in, I'll get a little bit more liberal with the RPM limit. You just don't want to take a fresh motor with these kind of crazy tight tolerances and this state of tune to redline. You can definitely seize the motor. Now, before we hit the twisties, you're going to watch me do something that people always forget to do, and that is bed in your brake pads. This is super important, especially on a hyper naked, that you actually get the pads bedded down. You're watching an abbreviated version of it, but simply all you got to do is start slow, let your pads cool down, go a little bit faster, let your pads cool down more, and then really jam on those brakes, and then let them cool down again.
Making sure your brake pads bed down is one of the best things you can do to actually improve your braking performance on the motorcycle, as well as improving the lifespan of those brake pads. You don't want to glaze up brand new pads, so actually take some time and bed them down properly. But once you get on a twisty road, the first thing you're going to want to do is just chuck your brand spanking new motorcycle into a corner and see what it can do, but I would urge you to not. So far, we've only ridden on the highway, and guess what? You have not scrubbed in any of the tire on this. You have no sidewall, chicken strips a mile long, and if I were to bail into a corner at 100 miles an hour on this bike, I would have some slipping issues. So what I would recommend is for your very first session out on a twisty road, not just for the first few miles, not just for, a few minutes, for the whole session, make sure that you're not using good body position. It sounds so counterintuitive, and when you do it, it feels so weird. But you want the whole sidewall to get scrubbed in, or at least a lot of it. And the best way to do that is, unfortunately, to use bad body position. Now, as important as it is to vary your gears on the highway, you also want to be varying it down here, because you're going to be a little bit more aggressive with adding power in a twisty road. So you want to make sure you're not just doing it in first and second gear on this thing. You want to find some times where you can actually dig in and really accelerate with this guy. Frankly, I think shifting down is more important than shifting up, especially with a quick shifter. I feel like I notice more improvement in a transmission when I'm shifting down a lot, because sometimes they can be a little bit herkity-jerkity when you first get them. And I've already noticed a big improvement in this bike's transmission feel over the first few hundred miles. Whee, is this thing fast though. Oh my god, it is so hard to find a spot to let this thing feed, even with the RPM limit set to 7,500. There is so much bike here.
Like on the highway, we've got a few do's and don'ts that I'd like to toss out there. First, do not lug your engine. Sometimes, especially on torquey motors, you might be a little lazy and skip a downshift because the bike has enough power to get the job done. But lugging a motor can cause excess wear on the bike. Second, use that rear brake. I know a lot of folks, myself included, skip it because the dual disc front brakes are so damn good nowadays, but you need to wear in that back brake. Once again, I'd remind you to switch rider modes just to change up that map, and then once you're later in the break-in, let those RPMs come up a bit more. I try to hit a good mix of highways and twisties, mostly so I can get familiar with the bike and how it works, and then start thinking about mods that I'd like to make. For example, on the Tuono, I'd want slightly taller bars and lower foot pegs. Sacrilege, I know, but it would make the bike fit me a lot better. One more piece of advice I'm going to leave you with is to check your oil after each ride or every 100 miles, whichever comes first. I wouldn't anticipate oil consumption issues so early on, but every motor is an unknown quantity. And it's better to be cautious and check your oil impulsively like a weirdo than run a brand new motor low on oil.
Now the real question is, after doing all of this break-in work, have I noticed a change in this motorcycle? No. There has been one point where I have actually noticed a change, and it's very important, and that is the brakes. The brakes have broken in significantly on this motorcycle. I was very careful when bedding in these pads. I made sure that I did it exactly the way I would do it if this was my motorcycle. I am extremely happy with the braking performance on this bike now. Now that being said, because we have a semi-active suspension on here, have I noticed a difference? No. I think the computer is doing a phenomenal job of evening it out, but it is important, if you don't have that semi-active suspension, you will probably feel a difference.
Whoa, hold up. Editing Spite here. I need to step in and correct something that I said. You probably won't feel the difference between a new suspension and a broken-in one. Why? Because it's changing constantly as you ride. It's the same principle as boiling a frog, but just because you can't feel it doesn't mean it's not improving. To really feel it, you need to ride a bike that's been broken in versus a brand new one back to back. But like I said, it's still improving, even if you can't feel it.
Have I noticed an increase in power on this motorcycle? No, this thing is making an astonishing amount of power right out of the box. And it's not like it was back in the old days where you could have two motorcycles that came out of the factory on the same day that have wildly different power figures. You actually used to see that, where back in the day, manufacturers would pick and choose the very best motorcycles to send to magazines and reviewers and stuff. That doesn't happen anymore because our bikes are just so well built now. I'm sure if we dynoed this pre and post, we would find that there is more power to be had here, but because there's so much under the hood already, I'm not noticing a difference. But with all of that being said, guys, let me know your thoughts on breaking in a motorcycle. Do you do it by the book? Do you break them in hard? Do you break them in soft? Let us know all of your thoughts down below. And a huge, huge shout out to Aprilia and AF1 for letting me borrow this phenomenal motorcycle. If you'd like to check this thing out, it's gonna be part of their ARD fleet here at MotoGP, and you can test ride this motorcycle right here. It's also gonna be on tour going through the United States. So if you wanna check out what this beast is like on a racetrack, you actually can. Click that link down in the description below and check it out for yourself, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.